Hey, Rugby Hub viewers, and welcome back. It is the Rugby World Cup final episode. Can you believe it? It's been an incredible tournament thus far. Myself and Gabsy, we experienced some of it while we were in France, and it truly has been a breathtaking tournament. And it's fantastic to see the Springboks playing against the All Blacks in the final. Gabsy, edge of your seat stuff. How are you?
Goody, lovely to see you. Yeah, I mean, the excitement levels are in the roof. So are the nerves, but
Mm.
the All Blacks versus the Springboks, it's a massive game. It's a final. I think, let's just quickly talk about the way they've both gotten to the final. I mean, let's first look at the All Blacks, Goran. What do you make, before we compare them to the Springboks, of how they've gotten to the final and how they would be feeling right now physically compared to the
Mm.
Boks?
Yeah, Gabsy, that's a good question. Obviously, they didn't come into the tournament as red hot favorites. They took a beating against South Africa in Twickenham in a warm up match. They lost the opening game against the hosts, France. But since then, they've really managed to turn things around. They've added aspects to their game that has really seen them score a mammoth amount of tries, and we'll get into the stats in a second. And then obviously, they have been building stronger and stronger, and they've gotten to this point in the final. There's no doubting the All Blacks. I mean, if you bet against the All Blacks, it'll be against your own peril. So they have had a relatively easy road to the World Cup, even though to the World Cup final, even though um, you can only sort of compare that to maybe then South Africa or some of the other teams who had quite a tough time. But that is no excuse. They are going to be extremely tough to beat. They know how to win Rugby World Cup finals. And then obviously, they had one extra day to prepare since they played on a Friday and this game will be played on a Saturday. So going in fresh, Gabsy, what do you think about the Springboks and their road to final in comparison?
I mean, yeah, obviously, I think you can't really compare it to just knowing that pool the Boks were in, having to play Scotland and Ireland. That was in itself, already knockout rugby from the start. And then I would say
Yeah.
Tonga also came out smashing against us. It was a really physical game against
Physical
Tonga.
battle, yeah.
And then had to go and play the hosts, France. Obviously, Ireland was also not an easy task, but then you play England, who came out obviously guns blazing, and the All Blacks played the Los Pumas. So I think
Mm.
obviously if we look at those games, I think the Springboks played maybe 5 out of the top 6 teams in the world, and the All Blacks only 2. So I
Four,
mean.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to go well 4. Yeah, I'm not going to go. There's no excuses. This is a World Cup final. I would say the Springboks probably had a bit more of a physical way to the final. Obviously, they've played massive games, and I would imagine the boys, have to really put in one last big shift, really get all that last bit of energy together, and really, give it their
Mm.
all, which I'm sure they will. And I mean, even if we would transition in a bit over to the team selection, I think that makes sense why we went with what we've done. But I mean, I don't know. Do you have anything to add on the two roads that they've had to face? I mean, I think it's just been yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, a tough one for the Box, but I'm really proud of where they
I
are.
think
Yeah,
Gabsy, I think it can go both ways, right? So you can see it as the All Blacks maybe not being as battle hardened, and you can see it, or South Africa is battle hardened, and that's why they could maybe be favorites going into this competition or into this final, or you can see it as the fact that the Springboks on fresh. We saw in that semi-final against England how emotionally and physically drained they were after that incredible defeat against France, which really took everything out them. Um, and then against England in the
you
semi-final,
mean
we really had to win scrape through. So
yeah?
you can see it as being a sort of yeah, a disadvantage, not being so fresh coming into the final. However, it's going to be yeah, it's going to be a massive one. We're going to have to see how that one plays out. Gabsy,
Yeah,
let's quickly look into the
of
history,
course.
right? Both teams are looking to win their fourth World Cup and also cement actually as the greatest rugby nation in the world. The history between these two sides obviously go way back. They've played in that 1995 um, Invictus Morgan Freeman final with Matt Damon leading the Springboks onto the field. So this time around, it is the opportunity of Siya Kolisi doing that. So with all that history, South Africa haven't lost yet in a final. New Zealand have lost once, and that was against South Africa in 1995. But that won't matter this time around, Gabsy.
No, of
Um,
course not. Of course
Gabsy,
not.
let's quickly look at the Springboks' performance thus far in this Rugby World Cup. All right, what do you make of
Yes.
it?
I mean, I think they've done it when it matters most. Obviously, against France, we found a way to beat France. We were trailing, we came back, and the same has happened against England. And to be honest, as a very patriotic, massive South African fan, obviously, I normally feel like we're on the other side of that. Normally, when a game is really close, I always feel like it doesn't go our way. And this year, and with Jock and Rassie, we found a way out of that.
Yeah.
We found a way to beat the hosts, France, who were obviously also in phenomenal form. They've beaten the All Blacks in their opener, and we found a way to beat them, with, their home advantage and everything that goes with that, after really tough pool stages. And then we went, obviously, played, I would say, not the best English team, but still, they showed up on the day. Owen Farrell led them, and they played a phenomenal game. They kicked the ball, they defended, they basically did to us what we did against France. And it was a
Mm,
tough game, but I've watched the Jim Hamilton on the rugby pod, and he talks about the emotional drain going into those games. The emotions of winning a game by 1 point 2 weeks in a row, staying in it
yeah.
for not 80 but 85 minutes, being there, and then obviously getting that relief. So that's a different challenge by itself. But I do think Jock and Rassie has prepared the boys with the rest of the coaching staff for this.
Mm,
So this is now our time, obviously, to really, bring it home. And I think
mm,
it's going to be a really tough task. But let's take, the opportunity here to transition over to the 7-1 split, because I think that's a massive
mm.
talking point. The Springboks have gone for the same kind of approach which they've played the All Blacks on Twickenham with. And I want to hear what's your thoughts on this, Goran. I mean, some say risky, some say maybe it was the plan all along, knowing how
Yeah.
tough the road to the final was. What do you make of this?
Well, I think that Rossi and Jog have kind of earned the public's respect for grinding out these victories, because let's not forget that France game and the England game, the quarters and the semi-final. It was obviously an incredible performance by the players to get those wins, but also extremely smart and tactical decision making from the coaches, and they've brought the right players on at the right time, and obviously had to make some very cruel decisions along the way, pulling Mone Lebok off in an extremely wet affair against the semi-final
England,
opponents in
yeah.
England, and they pulled him off at 30 minutes. So they've gone now for another extremely risky approach in naming 7 forwards and 1 back on the bench. So for those who don't know, um, why this is such a risky approach is because you only have 1 backline replacement, and that is Villy Leroux. So we don't have any scrum half cover, which usually teams would use to change a game tactic if that is necessary. We saw it last week against England when they brought off Reinach and brought on Faf de Klerk. We managed to change the game into our favor and play more our style. So that is a big risk. However, the reward can be a very forward dominant sort of display, and get a lot of penalties, allowing Andre to kick them over and keep a lot of pressure on the All Blacks. So I think it's an extremely bold call, Gabsy, but hopefully it's one that pays off. But yeah, they've got our backing, Rassi and Jock. So we'll have to just
It almost
bite
feels
our
like
nails and see.
almost feel like it feels to me like listening to you there, like you've been all along in the coaching staff with them. Thank you for giving our fans such nice insights. Or I don't know if it's Stacey giving you these stats, but no, Gordy, I think you sum it up quite nicely. And I think, let's just put one other thing in a positive note on the Springbok backline. Luckily, you have so many utility players in that back line, the likes of
Mm,
Damian Willems. So we know Andre can play in center. Obviously, it wouldn't be a preference to see Colby or Kirtley on scrum off, but we know that can also happen. So, I mean,
yeah.
it is risky, but we also know that, with what we have there, we could cover most positions. Should we have more than 2 injuries at the back, obviously, you would have to see the likes of a guy like Kwagga Smith moving into the back line or something like that. But let's not talk about that. I think you summarized it really well, and I also back the boys with their decision. We know it's going to be a wet affair. Even if it's not raining, it's been raining all week. It's going to be, wet conditions. And I think we don't know the All Blacks team yet, but we can expect quite a stable team selection from them. Maybe because Brody Retallick was benched last weekend, he could maybe come
Yeah,
into the starting lineup. But let's also not forget they also have quite a strong bench coming, on in that second half or in the last 20 minutes, whenever they decide. So I
absolutely.
do
Yeah.
think this is going to go down to the buzzer. It's going to be an ugly one, but it's at the end of the day a
Hmm.
World Cup final. The only thing that matters is the W. So whoever takes it, I don't think anybody cares how they take it. It's about getting that W, whether it's by half a point or a point. You need to get the W.
Yeah.
So I mean, Goody, to wrap it up, obviously, guys, please let us know what you guys think will happen. Let us know your predictions. And thank you for all the support throughout this World Cup. It's really been phenomenal. It's so sad we will have to do a recap episode and just, touch on some of the standout players. But let's wrap it up with a prediction. Goody, what do you think is going to happen in this one?
Oh, Gabsy. Obviously, I'm going to say the Springboks. But before I do, I just quickly need to remind our viewers before you go put in your predictions. If you look at some of the stats that the Springboks will be facing against the All Blacks, the All Blacks, the All Blacks have scored obviously the most points, 325. The second team is 238 in France. They've scored the most tries, 48 tries scored against the second best Ireland and France, who are on 30. South Africa only on 27. Most clean breaks, 81. So it's a beast that the Boks are going to go against, and
Yeah,
you'll be very very brave to go against the All Blacks in this one. But South Africa know how to win these games. They are a World Cup team, and they're going
exactly.
to pull
No,
it
thanks for
through in a very tight affair.
No, thanks for
Boom.
for that insight, Goody. Obviously, let's also keep in mind, respectively, the opponents they faced. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's going to be a massive game. It's going to be a massive World Cup final, and yeah, I'm also obviously going to back the boys. Hopefully, they can do it by 1 point. Then it's 3 1-pointers in a row. Stay consistent. And yeah, I mean, guys, just enjoy the rugby. It's the last game of the World Cup final on Saturday at 9 o'clock,
Mm.
Central European time.
I'll
Enjoy
bring you
it.
guys some insights from Paris this
Oh,
weekend.
yes,
Hopefully, a
Goody is
few
going to be
interviews.
there. If you still have a ticket, please contact us. You would happily take that. And let us know your predictions. Thank you so much for all the support. Goody, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rugby this weekend and enjoy Paris. Be safe.